It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Himanjali Sankar, Sreevatsa, Nevatia, Anjana Chowdhury to discuss the fictional and factual depiction of mental turmoil in conversation with Arunabha Deb.
So I'm guessing it's a go-ahead to start, a little ahead of schedule, but... So we have 3 debut authors on stage. One effectively debut author because it's Himanjali's first novel for adults, if I'm not mistaken. And Sreevatsa Nevatia's book, How to Travel Light, that's a memoir. And we have Anjana Chowdhury, Under the Peepal Tree, and that's a novel. And I particularly specify which is a memoir and which is a novel because I think the topic itself requires us to look at how fact and fiction really interact with the idea of mental turmoil. And I think one can safely say that no literature really worth discussing is devoid of mental turmoil. So if we start talking about literature that deals with mental turmoil, that's a rather wide canvas. So I think we have to restrict it to, whether rightly, wrongly, and we can discuss that too, mental turmoil that we sort of classify as a mental health issue, a mental health concern, and how these 3 books actually deal with that issue. I think it would be best if we start with Sreevatsa because his book is the one that is intensely personal, and that's one of the things that everyone has said about the book, about how honest and brave it is in terms of how it's dealt with the deep turmoil in his life that has been caused by bipolarity. So the only question, I'll keep it simple, and I think I'll let Sreevatsa take it from there, is that when you're writing it as fact, to what extent do you keep it fact, and what extent does fiction actually creep into that fact, and how believable are you really when we read you?
This is, I could go on, so please stop me when I've gone on too long. So bipolarity or manic depression, as it was known before it came to be known as bipolarity, has one strange symptom. That is that when you're manic, when you're on the high end of the bipolar spectrum, you start to feel that you remember everything. You also start to feel that you know everything, of course. The trouble is that very obviously you don't. Your memory is no better or no worse than anyone else's. But you pretend that that you know exactly what Mr. X told you under a tree while smoking a cigarette. And you believe all this to be true. Not all of it is. So fact and fiction for me was hard to kind of process and to kind of comprehend. And one of the reasons why was when you're sitting down to write a memoir, you obviously want it to be true in just as much as this is what I remember. This is what I remember to be true. I, of course, remember that I had lied. I of course, remember that I had made up things that had not happened or that were not said. So, for me, while writing, it was important to, of course, go back to each of those incidents. But I also did find it easy because I knew what I had invented. I knew what I hadn't. But to be able to have, I think for the lack of a better word, the courage to go out and say that, look, this is something that I had made up and this is a falsity, is something that is perhaps then a symptom of lucidity. This idea that one wants to be honest, that one wants to clear the air, that one wants to set the record straight, and that is something that for me proved to be very cathartic. This idea that this is fact and this is what I know and this is what I remember. To be able to somehow sift through memory and to arrive upon a narrative that you could say was authentic was something that, as I was saying, I found deeply cathartic. And it helped me tell the story of my life, which of course, like you said, had a certain amount of turmoil in it. it's the writing which actually really made the turmoil one that I could accept and move on from. So that was
Yeah, I think if Himanjali, we could turn to you from here, because yours is fiction. Mrs. C Remembers is fiction, but is that fiction that comes out of some personal experience or personal connect? Because that's a feeling one strongly gets while reading the book.
Yeah, you can hear me, right? Yeah, I'm very bad with the mic. So for me, personally, I've always been interested in the figure of an unreliable narrator,
Right,
so to
right.
speak. So you could, in literature, there are so many examples of that. Because what happens with that is, when the narrator is speaking, you don't know what happened and what didn't happen. It's not like the omniscient narrator who's whatever he or she is telling you, you know it's reliable. So that tension that it creates in terms of, there's so many examples actually. You can start with Nabokov and Lolita, and right now something like Gone Girl, and a lot of young adult novels now also have the unreliable narrator,
Right.
which usually implies a person who has a mental illness. So that's something I actually wanted to already write about. And I was writing a book on a 17-year-old boy who has schizophrenia, which was highly researched, and I still intend to finish that. But around the time when I was writing that, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I couldn't finish that novel because Alzheimer's was now what I was thinking of. And for me to make sense of anything I do write, it has to be fictionalized, because fiction, I don't know, I've never written a memoir, but fiction gives me a sort of sense of control, because I can control the narrative and decide what happens. So it sort of takes away that sense of helplessness in front of a disease which I can't really make sense of.
Becomes a tool.
Yeah, so it becomes a tool. So that's why it's a sort of interspersing of fiction and fact, which happens in my book.
And the other question, while we are still asking you this question, is there are bits in your book where the Mrs. C character, where the narrator is actually speaking on her behalf, of how she, while she's suffering or, and undergoing treatment, how she perceives the world. Now, what was that like, to step into the shoes of someone who is actually on the other side, to imagine that and then actually express that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I didn't find that tough. But I was actually going into, I'd watched Still Alice before that, and that made me think a lot about the way it was treated, the whole idea of going into the mind of a person who has a mental illness like Alzheimer's. So, it's anyway all about imagination when you're writing. So whichever character I'm depicting, whether it's a person with a mental illness or not, it is like I have to make that character relatable. I have to do certain things. And I, in fact, felt that it was almost easier to write this because it gave me more freedom, because no one really knows the mind of this person. So, yeah.
No, Anjana, if we may come to you, because it's, of course, fiction, and if you can quickly first tell us that why you chose this sort of framework, to place your first novel in, if that's something you could tell us. And then I'll move on to asking you more about, I think, the way you've dealt with how a support kind of system is necessary in a situation like that.
Indeed,
and how you've
yes.
placed that in the fictional kind of landscape. I think we'll talk about that a little bit.
Sure. The first question is interesting because my aunt who is here today, she's a PhD in psychology. She asked me, why did I make my heroine into somebody who's suffering from mental illness? And I said to her this morning, I said, because you taught me everything I know. And I had grown up with, my father was a doctor, and I'd grown up with, knowing about mental health illnesses. It wasn't a sort of closed subject in our house. We discussed all these things. And he would ring the doctor, a psychiatrist or, cardiologist, and we would have open discussions about what's going on. So when I created this novel, it was completely fictional. I had a completely different theme in mind. All I wanted to show was a chain of women, a mother, daughter, granddaughter, because I don't have that experience. I don't have sisters or grandmothers. So I thought I wanted the story from one generation to another. And then, like you construct a novel, you have to have conflict. And I thought I need to give my character something, some conflict, something that's bothering her, something that's causing her turmoil, which is going to lead to something else. And then it came to me that I know so many people in my family, friends, and I support a range of people who are suffering from mental health illnesses, and I feel unable to help. And I thought, if I want to be a writer, this is the only tool I have. This is the way I can help. I can spread the word, raise awareness. And I said, it's all right, to talk about your problems, to talk about your turmoil. And at that time, bipolar disorder was very common. And suddenly, it's as if everyone's got bipolar. And I thought, that's interesting. Why do we suddenly have this? And I wanted to explore that. And I knew some people, and I discussed their condition and what the psychiatrist had said, because fortunately for me is I can see the agonies in the others, and I'm glad so far in my life I haven't had to face that myself. But unfortunately, I don't have personal knowledge. I haven't suffered from a mental health issue so far, touch wood, and I haven't been to a psychiatrist, so I had to rely on my imagination, rely on talking to other people to find it. But primarily it was to find a heroine who's a flawed heroine. And if I say flaw, I don't mean it in a negative way. We all have something that we're suffering from. There's always some problem, and like they say, problem shared is problem halved. And I thought, why not give my heroine something that she's going to battle with, something like depression, which is going to get out of control, and in a very King Learish manner, push her to the edge, and then hopefully bring her back. So that was my
You say you haven't been to a psychiatrist ever. Sreevatsa has been to many.
We should talk after
yes,
this.
no. So and you also say that suddenly, a lot of people are expressing the fact that they are bipolar. So is being someone who's kind of been at that side of the spectrum, is that something you feel too, that
it's a fashionable disease?
I was trying not to say that, but yes.
Well, I'm trying to count the number of people I know who are bipolar. Unfortunately, one hand is plenty. I don't know that many people who are. I know that there are, of course, look, if we talk numbers, according to the government of India, 1 to 2% of the Indian population is either bipolar.
He went to St. Xavier's. Don't believe any statistic he throws at you. He's
So
just
did
making
I.
that up.
So did I.
Right, well, it's a very
No, but look, I would say don't believe any government statistic. That's probably a better kind of precaution. But the point is that if we do agree with the government this one time, 1 to 2% of the populace is either bipolar or schizophrenic, we're talking 1 to 2% of 1 billion. That's a fair, sizable number of people who are bipolar. So like you say, you wake up one morning and think that the world has gone bipolar. I wouldn't blame you for thinking that.
Is that because more people are coming out and discussing it with their families and then taking the next step and getting treatment, or is that the reason why? Otherwise, why would someone have that impression? That's
again okay. I think there are two things that happen. One is, of course, that more people are getting diagnosed. That's one. Whether or not the people who are getting diagnosed talk about it is something that we could talk about till the cows come home, and we wouldn't actually arrive at any kind of conclusion that one could verify. I believe that families typically, and it's not just in India, it's the world over. Mental health issues are hard to talk about. There is a stigma that's attached, and not everybody finds the agency, not everybody finds a degree of comfort in order to be able to bring that conversation to the living room. And for families to talk about what can we do to make this person feel better. I can say this for myself, that I'm very glad that because of my condition, my support system to a certain degree was forced also to bring this conversation to the living room and talk about how can we make my life better. But speaking about it in the open, for me, I only started seeing bipolar people in film with Silver Lining Playbook. I started seeing them on television with a show like Homeland. It's amazing, the retrospective diagnosis, where everyone from Virginia Woolf to Winston Churchill to Vincent van Gogh are all bipolar, and we feel part of a really special club. The truth of the matter really is that if all these people are, there are also a number of people who are not, who are not that famous. I mean, and the point is that those stories never really get told, and it's important to know that even though it's a condition where symptoms are similar, every individual narrative needs treatment, needs a treatment that is different. It needs a treatment, for the lack of a better word, that is special. And I just think that the idea that it's fashionable takes away from that. So.
Of course, yes. I was just being facetious. I hope you know that. Now, Anjana, if I may come to one line in your book, and I think that says it very well when the doctor says very simply that don't do it alone. I think that's so, and I think that's a strong sense I got from all three books, that the support system around the person is absolutely essential to how, in defining how the journey is going forward. So, I mean, did you take that from sort of personal experience, or how did you create that?
Yes, indeed, because like I was saying, I provide that support for a lot of people that I know, close family, relatives, friends, and I know how crucial it is to, you're their lifeline. I mean, you're seeing the doctor every few weeks, and you've got this medication, and you can be in a strange world and confusing world. You don't know what's going on. You feel you're losing touch with reality. And it's that age-old fear that, are they going to put me away? And, will I be in a white room and locked away? And that really is that cold fear we all have. And I don't know if there are many Bengalis here, but my mother had always said, there was this Bengali quote that, hoy hok sharbanash, na hoy jano buddhinash. So you can lose anything in this world, but I hope you don't lose your mind, because to us you think that's the ultimate issue. So I try and help, and of course I'm an empath and I take it all in. Then I have to then go to to somebody else, a friend or my husband or somebody else, to just be able to cope with it, because I try and help as many people as I can, and I know that how important this is. You need to have your doctor, your medication, your treatment, but you also need maybe a counselor to speak to. There's CBT, cognitive behavior therapy now, which is really good. You can have other counselors to talk to, a friend or a relative. If you feel you can't burden your parents or your brother or sister, find someone. That's what I always say.
Right. No, it's interesting you speak of if you can't find a parent or a brother or sister, because in Himanjali's book there is a depiction of this large family and how everyone's kind of playing a part in some way or the other, around the person.
Yeah. Not necessarily helpful, but
yes, but that's why I said they're playing a part.
Intention is to help, but again, the whole thing of course, I haven't studied psychiatry or any of that, so I don't know what I'm supposed to really do. You can just be there and be empathetic as far as possible, but it's not really possible for me to. I think maybe what is lacking is training for caregivers too, because it's probably a very lonely place where you are in your mind. Mostly people are not getting it, what's happening to you. And I think that must be the essence of, how you feel, because in any case, I think all of us, even people who are not so-called diagnosed with mental illness, there are times when you're always alone. And there's always times when you're feeling unhappy, you're feeling something which is not good in your life. So I imagine how much that would be amplified if you have to actually deal with being mentally ill, diagnosed mentally ill. So yeah, I really don't know. Of course, it's great to have a lot of people around, but I don't know how helpful it is. It just gives a sense of, I don't know, it makes the family feel useful possibly more than that we're trying to do something for you. But I don't know, again, that would maybe your personal experience, you would be able to speak about that. Do you feel people are actually able to understand what you're going through, or is it just like sort of...
If I may quickly interrupt before Sreevatsa starts, that his book actually deals at length with his experience with his family and friends and the complex kind of relationships that emerged out of the understanding of his condition by everyone around him, and how he finally negotiates that, with each of them. So I'm not letting you go. The question's for you. So it's you have to. of course it's difficult, so I'm not going to ask you how difficult was it or how complex, but is there ever an end to the process, is really what I want to ask.
Is there? It's funny. I was just hearing everyone speak right now, and the one thing that I keep reminding myself, bipolarity is a condition that has no cure. There is no end. I've had, touch wood, I've had 2 years of good health. I'm showing signs that the good health might continue. But despite taking all the kind of precautions that one might, there's no saying as to when something can go wrong. There's no saying as to when I might wake up depressed. There's no saying as to when I won't go to sleep for 5 nights because I'm manic. There was a question that you put to me. Is there a right and a wrong way of caring for somebody? No, there isn't. It's trial and error. You try something. Most families that I have known that have had to contend with a member who is either bipolar or schizophrenic or depressed for that matter, it's a novel circumstance, and it's a novel situation for many of them. When dealt with something that is so unfamiliar, sure, you make mistakes. You do things, you say things that you should not have done. That perhaps should not have been done in that circumstance. But does that make it wrong? I wouldn't think so. I would say that given your own knowledge, given your own upbringing, given your own coordinates, you did what you thought was best. Sure, and if it hasn't worked, you need to go back and you need to see that it hasn't. Ask yourself why, introspect, speak to mental health practitioners, speak to doctors, psychiatrists, and find a way that will enable the other person to feel better. But if you're in there and if you're caring, I feel that that's always a start. It takes a person a while to understand their condition. It takes probably the support system sometimes even longer to understand that person's condition because they are on the outside. I would say one thing that I think I speak from a position of privilege. The position of privilege that I talk about, one is that I was educated where I was educated, that I read the books that I did, I watched the films that delighted and entertained me as much as they did. I listened to music. I had access to all these things. Then I had access to the best doctors, the best medicines. And this is not something that everyone does have. Even you might have the money, but you might not find the right doctor. You might have the money, but you might have only read Chetan Bhagat. That's a problem. And the reason why I say that that's a problem is because one finds through this education, one finds through therapy, one finds through psychoanalysis a way to survive. And from that survival, whether or not you find yourself happy, that's again a subject of fortune. But just surviving it is what, as you asked, sometimes the most difficult thing. Once you've found a way of managing that condition, once you've found a way of surviving, you can go back to the kind of things that delighted you and be able to find that happiness again. But for all these factors to come together, yes, it's exceedingly difficult. But the point is that we do also need to move away from asking ourselves to always have our kid gloves on and say, is this right or is this wrong? Because that can be detrimental.
And I think connected to that is the idea of acceptance. And I think Himanjali deals with this in her book about how the extended family, society at large, how they kind of deal with a situation like this. And there are elements of hypocrisy. The kind of concern is often superficial, but it's something that all of us ultimately have to negotiate, particularly if there's someone in the family who is going through that. And Sreevatsa, I'll come back to you again for this, and then we can sort of, maybe everyone can answer this question. is that to what extent do you keep looking for that acceptance? And is there a point when you say that it doesn't matter if it doesn't come?
The problem with acceptance that we have is that, we're a bit too greedy for it. We find a bit of it, but we're not satisfied. We want everybody to accept us. We want to be accepted where we work. We want to be accepted, family, friends, lovers, so on and so forth. That needs to stop at some level, and you need to say that a certain amount of acceptance that your immediate support system perhaps, gives you. Your doctors, your family.
No, I'm aware of the immediate support system. What I mean is, and particularly in your case, as in the book, that there's the immediate support system that you get eventually, but then they have their immediate support systems, and then there's a web of extended family, and then quote-unquote society, and Calcutta Club, and Bengal Club, and and where does the web end, and how do you deal with that? So.
You stop caring. You absolutely just stop caring. It doesn't matter. And there's a reason why it should not also matter, and mental health should not play a role. I mean, Calcutta Club and Bengal Club should stop mattering after a point for anybody.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
So the point is that this idea that, so if I could paraphrase the question to a certain degree, we are talking about social acceptance on a wider scale. I think it's possible for me now to say that I enjoy a certain social acceptance because I have been able to have, my health has not been something that has drawn attention to itself for a while. I have a job. I go and try and make sure that I do to the best of my abilities, and I come back from it. And you tick the boxes. Somebody I know very well had once told me that sanity is basically a function of whether or not you can cook yourself some breakfast. I'm terrible at cooking myself breakfast.
Nothing to do with your sanity at all. Right?
Exactly. But I think the ability to be able to do that, perhaps, and I think that's how people look at you. But I think that comes down to how functional you are. And the more functional you are, the more acceptance you get. And strangely, rather than acceptance, functionality or being functional is something that it helps to be greedy for. So,
Himanjali, if you could take that question as well.
About social acceptance?
Yes, because that features quite heavily in your book as something that you're all dealing with.
Yeah, I think for me, you are experiencing it as a person. For me, it's a person who's very close to me who has the disease. So the whole, I deal with it differently when I'm away, when I'm alone when I'm away from Calcutta. But when I'm here, I prefer to be with family, with friends who are close rather than with extended family, because they will invariably come up and say, why did this happen? And that fake sympathy really gets to me. I mean, I'm like, you know as well as me why it happened, which is, you don't know. I mean, you don't know as well as me why it happened. So and they sort of hold your hand and all that, and I just feel it's not genuine, and so I don't enjoy that. But there are people, of course, there's lots of friends who are genuinely concerned, who know how to talk about it, who know how to, even when my mother's there, they know how to deal with her, how to sort of interact with her. So it's not like something that you should be, there's social stigma aspect of it, which I think is particularly, maybe it's lack of knowledge about, and I personally, it's not like I was born with knowledge on how to deal with an Alzheimer's patient, but you do learn. I mean, you do learn as you go along. So I would imagine people can. I mean, empathy shouldn't be that difficult, but it seems to be very rare and very difficult, and people seem to feel very immune, as in, I don't know, for anything bad that happens, my personal sense is, it could happen to me too. Right. But most people don't seem to feel that way, though I feel you should. And that's all, yeah. Right.
And Anjana, Himanjali saw it from the perspective of someone who's a family member suffering that. Sreevatsa has experienced it. But you've created this in kind of a fictional landscape. So, and how did you I mean, what were the parameters really that you were looking at when you created that scenario?
Well, the thing is, although it's a fictional world I've created, it's not based on anyone I know. I have closely known people, close family members who've suffered from depression, and it's something as if you almost have to hide it and you can't openly talk about it. So I know about the social stigma very well and the lack of acceptance, because first thing if you say somebody's got depression, they'll say, oh, why is he or she depressed? Nothing bad has happened in their lives. They need a reason that either you've had bereavement or, something, you've lost your job or something. There's always a reason. And for depression, there is no reason. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it is triggered by an event traumatic event in your life. But quite often it's that, feeling that grows inside you and it grows bigger and bigger, like a seed, and then it just takes over your body till you can't function, and you need to get help. And when that happens, and your world is crumbling. And I think what is worse is that you can't tell people about it. People feel that they can't say that, I'm feeling low today, I'm feeling a bit depressed, I'm unable to come to this event. They'll have to make up an excuse and say, I've got the flu, or, I've got a stomach bug or something. And I think that's so unfair. We should be able to say, I'm having a really bad day. I've got, people I know, some young members of our family who know that they can tell me that it's a duvet day. They call it a duvet day. It's when they just hide under the blanket and they just can't get up and function. And I tell them, don't push yourself. If you're having a day like that, indulge in that and, take a break. And I think that's one of the things that had really bothered me, is that there are lots of things, prejudices that I deal with in the book. One of them is like, social caste, class, that sort of nonsense. And one of the big thing is mental health. And I'm so happy to be able to talk about it, that we've actually got a panel talking about it in Kolkata. I think that's a huge step forward, that we're all here and we're talking about it openly. And I think the acceptance is, let me just clarify, there's social acceptance, but there's also personal acceptance. You need to accept to yourself that it's okay to say that you've got a mental health problem. It's nothing. If you can be open about it and tell the world, this is what's wrong with me, I'm an articulate, intelligent person, but this is why I cannot do, these tasks. Sometimes I have bad days. And then that's when that larger acceptance will come. Then you're educating people.
Just one thing that I do want to ask. A lot of the times when, and I will say this from my own experience, there were days when I was either so depressed or so manic that there was no way that I would be able to articulate to anybody articulate for them my state of mind.
Yeah, sure.
I think mental health and or even mental turmoil sometimes forbids us from articulating what possibly might be plaguing us.
That's probably when you need really somebody you can trust, like, I don't know, close family, sibling, friend, somebody who can make that excuse for you and say, this person, cannot come into work today, cannot come to this social event today.
Sure.
Did you have anyone like that? Because I
absolutely.
Yeah, because I think that's really useful, because you're absolutely right. There are days when you don't want to talk. You don't even have that ability to express yourself. And I counsel someone who I make the excuse for on their behalf. They only have to just send me an email, and I know, or a WhatsApp or something, that today's an off day, or I'm having a bad week, and I make the excuses for them. So you're right. When you're in those days, the black days, you just cannot come out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just something that proves hard sometimes.
Yeah.
No, I'll come back to something that you said, that you called it nonsense, caste, class, and mental health along with that.
Sorry, didn't mean to offend.
No. But what I'm trying to say is that those are the quote-unquote the issues that one kind of centers a narrative around.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think a book cannot be just a sum total of the issues it addresses. It has to be something larger, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask all of you this question, that is ultimately the goal to write something that passes muster in aesthetic terms? Is that the ultimate objective when you're setting down to write a book like that?
Sorry, it's a bit noisy. Aesthetic.
Is your goal to achieve something that passes muster in aesthetic terms? That
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than be a sum total of issues that you address.
Then I would have written a textbook. I think for me, I was always a very imaginative child, and creating stories is what I love. I love making up characters. And somebody told me that I'm like a method actor, so I really have to get into that person's head. I would ask an 8-year-old, if you overheard this conversation, how much of that would you understand? So creating that world for me is a little bit self-indulgent, and I absolutely love it. And there are aesthetic reasons, there are artistic reasons why I write. And if I can change a few lives by doing, picking up an issue or two, that's fine. But no, ultimately my goal is the aesthetic, the artistic, because I adore literature, and I want to create this, beauty. And sometimes it can be, savage, the truth. Sometimes it can be a bit raw, but ultimately it's artistic, really, let's say.
Yes, Himanjali, I mean, that's pretty evident in your book as well. I mean, the way it's structured.
Yeah, well, that's been a problem area with my book, because I think I'm more interested in people who don't know me reading the book. I'm much more interested in their feedback, because then they read it as a book is supposed to be read, as a work of fiction. And that response is much more important, because people I know, I mean, whether they intend to or not, they are looking for my life in there. And that's it's disorienting for me, because while ABC in the book might have happened, DEF hasn't. But you're trying to, in fact, there's an interesting, like in the first chapter of my book, so I'm not giving away too much since it's the first chapter. So the woman, she sort of facilitates her mother-in-law's death. So I know that there are relatives who said that, oh, we didn't know this. And that's really shocking, because my mother didn't do that. Or I hope she didn't. I don't know. But
we'll never know.
We'll never know. So I thought that was a nice creative tension I created. And then, like, if you're questioning, oh, did that really happen? I'm like, it's not a one-to-one correlation with my life. And if you keep taking apart sort of little bits and saying that did this happen or did that happen, it completely ruins the book. Because the success of a book is in the writing and in how you respond to it outside of your knowledge of the author's life. But saying that, I understand that's a problem, because it is I would be also, if I'm reading a book written by a friend, I would look for the things I know. And that's also exciting, and I understand that there's a general curiosity, which one has when reading. And so when you read Charles Dickens and you know that he tortured his wife or whatever, and then you see that these deep books where he seems to have such a great understanding of life. So you try to think, oh, did that man write this, and how did that happen? So yeah, there's an interest in the author's life is natural to a certain extent, but too much closeness or too much intimacy is also not very nice for the author.
Sreevatsa didn't have that problem because it was a memoir, so he didn't have any distancing to do.
No filters.
No filters. And there are several references in the book to literature and to film. In fact, my favorite chapter in the book is the one where he compares his relationships, of which there have been many, with 3 films, and kind of compares how the relationships kind of progressed and compares them with, and one of them is Opu Shongshar. And you talk about several other books that have informed you, and how literature in fact provided a sort of sustenance when, in your not so nice days, let's put it that way. So ultimately you said it in one of the panels in Delhi as well, if I remember, that your allegiance is to the sentence, that how does it sparkle at the end of the day. It doesn't matter whether your bipolarity is expressed with clarity, but your sentence matters. So is that something that you're sticking to even now, or has more contemplation about the book changed your mind?
When I was a cub reporter in Delhi, we had an editor who used to come into, so there used to be some 5, 6 of us, just rookie journalists sitting there trying to file copy, and he used to come and holler, "You have to turn the sentence. You have to turn the sentence." And I used to sit there and think, you have to turn the sentence? What in the world does this man mean when he's saying this? Until I just kind of figured that he's just saying you have to write well. That's basically what he was trying to say. I tried my level best to turn the sentence. And I did that because, not for any other reason. Look, I would like to think that I never ever wanted to piggyback on an issue. I didn't want to write about my mental health because I thought it would sell. I wanted to write a book that would be able to convey something that might perhaps allow somebody else to relate to what it might be like for somebody living with bipolarity as a diagnosis. Whether or not the person who is bipolar feels what the person feels or does what the person does. Whether or not somebody who's not bipolar, who has not, or even not a member of that support system, somebody who might not know nothing of mental health even, would be able to come to it and say that I enjoyed reading it because I could see myself somewhere. That it makes these things possible, or possible for people who, again, might not be afflicted. And I feel that the only way that a person can do that is that if a person is conscious about the kind of writing that they are putting out there. I think that if it's staid, I think that if it's cliched, I think that if it's ill-thought and uninventive, it would never be able to do what one really wants to, which is for another person to feel, I could be him.
But is there ever a conflict? And I ask you this because you don't have the cover of fiction. You know, I mean, if you call something fiction, you can get away with a lot. But in your case, was there ever a point where you felt that twisting a situation, or maybe tweaking it slightly, putting it in a different way, kind of deviating from what really happened, kind of adds aesthetic value to the narrative flow of your work? And if that becomes an imperative, would you ever choose the latter to kind of keep the aesthetic framework of your book intact?
The funny thing is, it brings me to dialogue. When writing, you pretty much remember how an incident transpired. You remembered what was the outcome. You remember how you went into it. You remember how you were changed. Or you can imagine how somebody else was. But what you don't always remember is what did the person say exactly. Or what was your precise question. The other day, a writer that I know was boring me to a certain degree by arguing that indelicate embrace is a much better sentence than in a delicate embrace. And we talked about this for a while.
Please tell us who this is. Come on, you have to.
No, probably over tea later. And we were having this long conversation about this one line, and it made me think that when I'm creating dialogue, for instance, am I creating dialogue so that it sounds better? I want to be truthful to the voice of a person. I want the people to be able... Thankfully, no one has turned around and said, I never said that, or I could never say that. And that is perhaps the most that one can hope for. But if my answer, if I just had to focus on what it is like creating dialogue, that's when you feel the most uncomfortable. Because you feel that you're creating dialogue that sometimes is theatrical, perhaps, but it might not have been that dramatic. And you tussle with that a fair amount. But I would say that my kind of struggle happened when it came to dialogue. Other parts of the book were perhaps easier to write and without that kind of conflict.
Yeah, I think that would be the limitation, not limitations, but that would be because you're writing a memoir, so you feel the need to be authentic. So when I was doing this, it was really, in a way, much easier because I love writing dialogue. It's sort of, and yeah, you can do whatever you like with it, but if I had to be authentic, that would be tougher. So yeah, no, just adding to that.
And Anjana, if I may ask you that, because it's pure fiction in your case, does it bother you, or would it bother you if someone labeled your book as a mental health book, or like you said, caste, class, whatever, a book that is essentially associated with those issues? Would that bother you? And if that happens, how do you deal with it? How do you kind of define where your book stands?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so far that hasn't happened because people have really read it as a story. and then the story comes first, and then the issues come next. But mostly, this is my first time back in India after many years, and in the UK and in France, where I lived for many years, they was fascinated by this insight into India, which is modern and changing all the time, but that there are issues, and because it's written quite openly, they said that they didn't know about this, so they were very, very interested and fascinated by it. So they didn't actually label it. But they found the themes really interesting. But I have to say, I went to a library once to donate a copy, and they said, they saw the blurb, and they said, we'll call Mind, Charity Mind, to come in. And I thought, yes, great, if that raises awareness. And for me, if it does, raise awareness, that's fine. But ultimately, it is a story, and that's how I want it to be. Hopefully it's a piece of literature.
Right. No, absolutely. No, and I thought I'd ask each of you this as a fun kind of question in a serious kind of discussion, that when it comes to literature around mental turmoil, mental health, do you have favorites? Are there go-to books? Yes, since you've
Mad Woman in the Attic, like Jane Eyre. Yeah. So, but of course that's not. I found it really, as a child, it made left a lasting impression on me, the figure of the mad woman, because she's hardly there for, must be a few pages at the most, but she would haunt me a lot till I read Jari's the Wild Saga Associé. So that sort of seemed to make sense of, it's a prequel for those who don't know, a prequel to Jane Eyre written afterwards, written very recently. So that goes into the mad woman's childhood, Bertha Mason's childhood, and so how she grew up in the Caribbean, and then, of course, there's a young Rochester who arrives there, and they are powerfully attracted to each other. And that just calmed me down, that there's this whole explanation. So I suppose especially with mental illness, you do feel the need to see the reasons. Right. So it sort of gave a nice ending in my head to the figure of the mad woman in the attic. And I think that's anyway been a very interesting, it's a popular trope in literature, because there's been a book, a feminist book, which is called Mad Woman in the Attic, and yeah.
Anjana, would you like to go next?
Oh, God, I'm struggling to think. There's, of course, Sylvia Plath. But to be honest, I like to create my own world and my own kind of my own madness, in a sense. But the book that inspired me, and which is going to lead to my next book, is The Outsider by Camus. And that was the other extreme, is this man who has no emotions. So I think that creates a blank canvas for me, because I think if he doesn't have emotions, then what is it like to be tortured by emotions? And that's where I learn a lot from art as well. So Vincent van Gogh, and I just love the Renaissance, and I like to create my own madness.
I think, Anjana, you said earlier, you made this point about method acting when you were sitting down to write. I think for me, I took Mrs. Dalloway a little too seriously, the character of Septimus Smith. I remember reading it and telling a friend, I really want to go mad. I really want this for myself.
Spoke too soon.
Yeah, I spoke too soon. And it did happen. I would say Virginia Woolf, all of Kundera, whatever his characters are afflicted with, is highly dangerous. But two psychoanalysts made a big difference to me and my life. One is this man called Darian Leader, and the other is Adam Phillips. Two books in particular by Leader, What is Madness and Strictly Bipolar. It's actually reading about the case studies that makes it so common, your troubles, and a book called Going Sane by Adam Phillips. So these are the books that impacted me muchly.
I think we have to kind of start wrapping up. Since 3 authors on stage, the obvious last question would be, what are you working on now, and what can we expect from you? You already mentioned you're working on something.
Yeah, more madness. So this time it's a psychopath. So if anybody asks me, where I've got the research from, then I have to say it's fictional. I did want to tweet a message and say, are there any psychopaths in London who would like to come and meet me in a restaurant, and I would talk to them. And my son said, no, it's a very bad idea, Mum. And he's a risk taker. So if he said it's no, then I'm just going to have to rely on research. But again, I use method acting. And people have asked me, how do you know how the psychopath feels? So I said, well, if I was in his position, what would be my disappointments in life? What is my motivation? So I really have to go through that, and I feel the pain of the character, and I put myself in that situation and think logically what would be the next step.
So is there a timeline for the book? Or?
Yes, I should be editing madly now, but I'm on the second edit, and then I have a very trusted editor who really gets me and gets my literature, and then hopefully it'll be published, I don't know when, end of this year or something. It's called No Missed Call, and it's told mainly from the point of view of the psychopath. So hopefully that will be including. And I showed it to a few people, and out of all the 15 people who we we were critiquing each other, they said we'd like Bikash Roy the best because we don't know what is going on and what he's up to next. And it's quite dark and it's quite intense, but it's funny as well in a way. And I was telling my husband today that the opening scene is, the number 8B bus stop. I used to take the bus from Lower Circular Road corner, and that's where boy meets girl leads to dangerous consequences. So I'll say no more.
Right, of course. Himanjali, you said you're working on something.
Oh yeah, at the beginning of the session
and
I mentioned.
Will that be your next book as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've actually almost finished that because that's something I was writing before I was writing this. So it's again mental illness because it's a boy who has schizophrenia, 17-year-old. So it's a young adult book.
Right.
And yeah, I've been inside that book for a while.
Just thought of asking, when you're writing for young adults, is there something you have to keep in mind specifically when you're dealing with something as serious as mental illness?
It's more, not really. I don't find it very different. It's just that the themes, like you are dealing with younger protagonists, and the kind of themes would not be, say, there wouldn't be marriage, there would be no kids, things like that. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's also an artificially created genre, which happened much later. So like now, things which we read as an adult are now categorized as, like Salinger, that would be young adult now. Well, I don't think we knew, we read it anyway, at whichever point we wanted.
And that's about to be published soon? Or?
That should be sometime this year, but not very sure. It's my editor is looking at it now, so yeah, same stage.
No, just everything is far too premature to be talked about.
Far too premature. He's only going to write one book, ever.
That's true.
Let's hope that's not the case. If there's anything that you're working on, now's the time,
There's a piece of non-fiction that a friend and I are thinking about working on together, which talks about actually moving beyond sanity and insanity and talking about things in terms of harm as to what that does legally, the ability or the propensity to harm or being safe from it. That's one, and there's an idea for a novel that's been sitting in my mind in my drawer for too long. So that's that.
No, when you say harm, do you mean abuse? Because that forms an important part of your book. Is that something you're looking at specifically?
No. By harm, I actually didn't. Well, a person's ability to harm the other person could obviously be abuse.
I specifically meant sexual abuse, since that.
No, it really doesn't deal with that as far as its description in my book is concerned. It was something that I felt was kind of obvious to talk about just because of the bipolar discourse that childhood trauma leads to a certain amount of...
and the way you've done it, one can't help but be amazed at how, the courage that required and the honesty and...
No, it actually just requires psychoanalysis and lots of it. It makes it seem less sentimental. You feel less sentimental about it, less emotional. And you start looking at it as fact, as something that happened. You go through breakdowns and so on and so forth, but honestly, 2 decades later, being sentimental about it perhaps doesn't look that good. So.
Are there any questions? None at all. They've answered them all, it seems. There's one.
Thank you. It's just a question for the gentleman there. Answer it if you want. Was there a time when you were in denial of your condition? And if so, what made you accept your condition?
2 things. I think I was in denial for a fairly long time. I was in denial when I was manic for the first time. I was in denial after my diagnosis for about 1.5 years. It was only after my second manic attack that I began to accept my diagnosis. Just because history had repeated itself and violently at that. So it made me think that joining the dots made me believe that there must be something to what the doctors say. But what made me accept my diagnosis finally was finding the right doctors, finding the right psychoanalyst, finding the right psychiatrist who could explain the condition and to me in a manner that made me, that made it possible to stencil myself around it or the condition around me, either way. So it was finding the right doctors that made me stop being in denial of my condition.
Are there any more questions? There's one at the back.
This is a question for you. Basically, means I have been personally through this phase, not the bipolar, it's what they called OCD, that was 3 decades back, still continuing basically, though at a much less level, and I have come to live with it. But how do you, how does one accept that you will never be able to reach your potential, whatever potential you had? You'll never be, at least I didn't, whatever, I envisioned for myself when I was 15, that I can achieve this, I can achieve this. That is far-fetched basically. It means I couldn't, and that's a huge repentance. So how does one it's a permanent, why me?
Yeah.
Maybe along with maybe 1% or whatever, without any reason. I have not done any harm to anybody or whatever at the age of 15.
Sure. I asked myself why me for very, very long. I write about asking myself that question as well. The one thing that I do believe is that when we're 15 and what we aspire for or what we think that we will achieve, at one level it is far-fetched. When one reaches a point in time when one looks back or when one tries to look back without regret or looks at one's life objectively, one says that this is what I have, this is what I can do, and I'm just going to start doing that. That's what I did. I said that my mental state will only allow me to work for 4 hours a day. So I just worked for 4 hours a day. And that 4 hours became 5 and became 6, and I was lucky that number could increase, not quite exponentially, but slowly and gradually. The point is that everyone has limits and everyone has circumscriptions. To be able to find a certain amount of productivity within that helps. And I always feel that the best person to go to with this question is a mental health practitioner, be it a psychiatrist, be it a therapist, be it a psychoanalyst, because only they will be able to make you comfortable with your limits. Because in my case, that's what happened. The medicines that I was taking had many side effects that didn't allow me to do things like hold a cup or hold a plate. But were it not for me trying to understand my condition alongside actually struggling with it, I don't think I would be able to I would have been able to write a book about it and sit in front of you and talk to you about it. The one thing that helps is people who see this day in and day out and who are able to either tell you that maybe the limits you imagine are not quite the limits, that maybe you could go further, and if there are any limits as to how to perhaps even feel a certain amount of happiness living within those conditions. So I would say the right doctors are the key.
There's one more question here.
My question is addressed to all three or any of the three authors here. I think the moderator mentioned that it's a debut novel for all three.
Well, it's a debut novel for Anjana, it's a debut memoir for Sreevatsa, and it's a debut adult novel for
Okay,
Himanjali.
so they're all debutant writers. That's
In
the point
some
I
way,
was
yes.
trying to get at. I was just wondering that, did you ever in the course of your writing get this, were you plagued by self-doubt that is my story really worth telling? You know, considering the nature or the common thread that runs through your writing. I just wonder that...
Yeah. Personally, for me, I was to begin with writing for myself because I was trying to, that's how I was sort of making sense of the situation I was in. And so to begin with, I didn't think of the audience and who I was writing for. So I think that in a way helps because it doesn't really hamper it doesn't inhibit your writing in any way because you are writing, because as you said, it's cathartic sometimes to write. So that was the starting point for me. So yeah, anyone else?
Yeah. I have been riddled with self-doubts all my writing life, and I think it comes as part of the territory. When you're doing something artistic, you never have the full confidence. You never get to that stage. I thought I would with my first novel, but it's the same with the second novel. But at some point, if you give it out to someone else and they read it, my publisher, Cinnamon Press. There was a lady, Jan Fortune. She said that my story was eminently worth telling, and that gave me confidence. So I sent it to competitions, and when this won the debut novel of the year, I knew I had something important. And you give it out to other, writer friends or beta readers, and they will say that yes, this is a story that others would learn from or would find interesting. And I think every story is meant to be read, and ultimately you make that decision, you take the plunge, because you say that who am I writing for? Otherwise, it's a diary. If you're writing a novel, you have to have readers, and it is hard, and the self-doubt never goes away. But usually, other people sort of tell you, there's something worth there.
I'm plagued by self-doubt still. I apologize for what I write because I don't think it's worth reading. But I keep reminding myself about what my editor said, turn the sentence. And hopefully maybe I was able to turn one or two and that makes me happy. That's it.
Any more questions? Don't think there are any more questions. Thank you very much. All the 3 books are available, so in case you want to pick up copies, I think they're available near the entrance, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much, and we really look forward to whatever books you're writing next, and hopefully Sreevatsa will write a next one, even though you assures us that he's nothing in the pipeline. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.